Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Sit Around the Fire. I'm excited for you to be here, and I'm excited to be here as well. Want to give you an idea about what you're diving into and listening to today. So you are tuned into the podcast where stories are shared, walls come down, and real healing begins. I'm your host, Ashley Dillard. And each week, we explore mental health, resilience, and the deeper work it takes to transform your life from the inside out. Now, today, we're talking about what happens in the moments that change everything for us. And even more importantly, what happens afterward. My guest with me on this episode today is Packy Dempsey, and his story speaks directly to trauma, identity, survival, and the hard road back to healing. He is a retired law enforcement sergeant, investigator, and longtime canine officer, speaker, and now author whose life changed in just 4 seconds. His conversation with us today is for first responders, for families, and for anyone who's ever looked strong on the outside while struggling on the inside. So welcome to the show. Should I call you Jay or should I call you Packy? What do you like?
I got 3 girls and a granddaughter at the house. I'll answer to anything, but Packy's good.
Nice. I like that one the best, so we'll go with that. Well, welcome to the show.
It's an honor to be here.
Well, for those of you who are listening to us today, and I'll give you, Packy, my number one leading question into every episode is for the person who's listening to our conversation today, what is the most important thing that you want them to hear, that you want them to walk away with?
We'll talk to the first responders, and that includes all first responders, dispatchers, to the doctor in the ER, to the paramedics, to the firemen and the military, that we can train to not only survive but win. And I'd like to tell you how I won.
Good. I would like for you to tell us as well. So I'm very excited. So leading into your story, which I would invite everybody to go check out your website because you have a lot of really great information, and particularly your video on there with your literal dash cam footage of what happened to you, or one of the things it sounds like. But I want to back up before that moment happened, and I want to ask you, who were you before those 4 seconds that changed everything?
Well, I followed my father's footsteps into a paper mill, and that 2.7 years was miserable. There was nothing but mundane, and I always wanted to be in the military. I always wanted to be a police officer, and I started that journey, and I failed a bunch of times, including the entrance exam, to certifications, to somebody else got hired in my spot. I failed a lot, but I kept going forward with what I felt the spirit to take me to, and that was in law enforcement.
And in that, like, were you, when you went into law enforcement, were you in a relationship? Were you married at the time? Did you have kids? Like any of that kind of stuff? Walk us through
No
that.
kids. I was married to my high school sweetheart, and I was definitely in love with canines. I'd had one as a kid that really took good care of me. Her name was Princess, and I named my first police dog Princess, which I picked up at 6 weeks old. I learned how to train her through a magazine and the movie Cops.
That's awesome. I saw some of your pictures that you have with her. I love dogs a lot. So I was like, oh man, she looks amazing. So tell us a little bit about that moment, the 4 seconds, and kind of that diving into that story so our listeners can understand where you're coming from. Of like, walk us through that moment and what ended up happening.
Well, I had left the office that day. I was assigned to the narcotic division because I had a police dog, and I lived only a few miles from the courthouse. So I took my vest off and laid it over the chair, and I picked up the dog, and we headed home. I washed my patrol car. I took her inside, let her enjoy the air condition, and all the deputies were tied up for whatever reason, calls or court. and the dispatcher defaulted to me and said, "Hey, would you go out to this Air Force Base Section 8 housing that he had received over 200 calls from that area up until that time." And I took the call, drove the speed limit, no sirens. I actually stopped and talked to a fellow investigator along the way. And I arrived on scene, let the dispatcher know, hey, I was 1081, which means I was in the area. And I circled through the cul-de-sac, and 8 males ran from me. And I just kept driving, drove the cul-de-sac, radioed the dispatcher they had left. I'd be there for a few more minutes. And when I returned, the males didn't leave. They stayed put. I positioned my Suburban in an angle where I could see the crowd. And as I got out, I knew 6 of them. One of them was very unfamiliar. I hadn't seen him before. I radioed out, got out of the car. The dog began to bark, doing her intimidation thing, which the dog was fairly new in the area. So they hadn't really learned about police dogs there. I got out and asked the guys. They told them they needed to leave. They were skipping school. They were dealing drugs. They were gambling. Uh, they had loud music, and so I knew them all from previous encounters. So I sent them on their way. But the one kid that I didn't know had a piece of plastic between his finger and thumb, which at the time crack cocaine was very prominent in our area. And I stopped him and asked him what his name, and he stuck the crack in his pocket. He wouldn't answer me. I asked him again, could I pat him down? He said, sure. I said, do you have any guns? He never said a word. I didn't mean to say sure. He just nodded. And then he nodded again. As I patted him down, I searched his waistline for weapons. And then I went to the pocket where he had put what I felt to be my probable cause to be there was crack cocaine. After I patted him for weapons, I reached for that pocket. It had a hole in the pocket, and I was like, So I shook the pat's leg. The crack fell out the bottom. He turned to run. I grabbed him on the arm very forcefully and said, relax, you're under arrest. He immediately went for my weapon.
Wow.
All right. And then he got on top of me, and the other guys were starting to come in and chanting and saying what they were going to do to me. They had actually planned this assault, and had this new thing that just came out called a bailout system. And I hit the button on my gun belt. The dog came out. The other guys ran off because they saw the dog come in, and she knocked the suspect off of me. A few minutes later, or a few seconds later, we end up in view of the camera. At the time, I was trying to put out on the radio that my hands were full. I needed some help. The trooper post was only about 300 yards away, but they had to go almost a mile to get to me because it was a cul-de-sac. As I was getting the upper hand, the dog was biting, and the dog actually bit me a couple times. I had to get her to release, so I'm fighting, trying to get in on the radio. I'm trying to keep the other guys off of me. I'm trying to keep my dog from biting me. I'm trying to keep this guy away from my weapon. As I went to handcuff him, I didn't know, but he was reaching for my weapon. As he took the weapon away from me, he took a strike at the dog, hitting her in the ground, causing the weapon to jam. I didn't know this. I didn't know it was my weapon. He started pulling the trigger and said, you're going to die. And I could hear the trigger hitting the housing, but I was like, he must have the safety on, and I must have missed that in the pat down. That looks like a Beretta. As I regained my footing, I could see an image of my wife and child sitting on the front porch. I carried that picture on my speedometer and kept it on my desk at work. And I was thinking, I'm never going to see them again, and somebody else is going to walk her down the aisle. And I began to get up my second wind. After 1 minute struggle, I was pretty spent. I had my lungs were burning. I was out of breath. I could see the pulse in my eyes. I began to lose my hearing, and I reached for my primary weapon. And you can see on the video, I reached twice and looked once and realized my gun's missing. So it took me about 4 seconds to realize I got to use deadly force. The whole time he's pulling the trigger on my gun, on the gun that I didn't know was mine. And I pulled a backup weapon, fired 5 rounds, center mass, just like you were trained in the academy. And he turned totally ineffective. And I thought, I missed him. And then the tunnel vision went away, and I could see the other males in the background start to run. And I thought, if I shot 5 times and he ran off, where'd them bullets go?
Hmm.
I gave chase. Me and the dog gave chase. He fell over just couple of hundred, not 100, but a few yards from where I'd fired the rounds. And he turned and tried to shoot me again. And at that time, I was like, that looks like my gun. The dog engaged. I was able to break the gun away, clear it just like you in training. I had a few choice words with the guys that thought they were going to come in. The dog began to defend me, and I was able to clear my weapon, get it in battery, get ready, and I go back to retrieve my walkie-talkie and go to 00, which is officer needs all assistance.
Wow. Holy cow. What did I mean, I just hearing you talk about it, and of course, like I said, I've seen the video, but all the extra details of knowing your side of it now, or hearing like you didn't even know that that was your gun, like, and trying to put all the pieces together as this is all happening is just incredible.
Well, psychologically and physically, I began to shut down. I got to where I couldn't hear. Uh, First officer was a trooper friend of mine, arrived on the scene, was never so glad to see him. Relationships between the troopers and the local police were not that great at the time, but I had established a relationship with him because I had a dog and they could call me on roadside stops. So my friend arrives, and my supervisor puts me in the front seat of the car, and I look up, my camera's running. I had just recently purchased the camera. Prior to nobody had a camera in the county, and I had just purchased one. I had turned it on, it was running, and I began to shut down because I couldn't breathe, I couldn't feel my arms, I couldn't stand up. I tried to talk. A friend of mine from the city, I was working for the county, but a friend of mine with the city come and physically picked me up, put me in his car. The investigators on the scene had taken my weapons. The crowd's growing, so I began to feel like I couldn't defend myself if they broke security around the tape. Immediately, they began to say I'd shot him in the back, and I was thinking, no, I didn't, but the crowd kept chanting, he shot him in the back 5 times for no reason.
Mm.
Went to the hospital, got checked out, went to the courthouse, and these are my friends. These are people I've been coming in and out of for over 7 years, and they all began to whisper and wouldn't look at me, wouldn't speak to me, but I could hear whispering, and I was like, I wonder what's going on. The Alabama Bureau of Investigations called me and read me my rights, and I'm like, what are you reading me my rights? The guy tried to kill me. Do I have to defend myself? And first thing he said out of his mouth, I'm going to let you know all the shots are to the front. And I was like, I know that. He goes, no, that the witnesses are stating you shot him in the back. And I went on the defensive. An attorney friend of mine caught me in the hallway and started representing me right away. He took me down, let me see the video in the chief deputy's office, and I thought, I shot 5 times. I thought I'd shot twice. The investigator on the scene asked me, how many times did you shoot? I said, twice. He went back to the body, come back to me. Are you sure you shot twice? I said, I shot twice. I saw the video. I shot 5 times. When I approached him and he almost shot me again, I had an empty weapon. I didn't realize that until that night. The chief deputy was great to me. Sent me home. My wife came, got me. We went on administrative leave. Few guys came by. Church began to bring food. Several of the officers from other agencies began to come by, and they camped somebody out in the front yard because the community had begun to burn tires and pallets and shoot at the police. And try to get them suckered into an ambush, and it was a really long night for them. Meanwhile, I'm at home feeling guilty that I couldn't be out there with my friends, and somebody's going to get hurt because of me.
So there's a lot to unpack in all of this. But let's go back to when, like, you're taken to the courthouse and everything starts turning to investigation. Is Well, the psychological impact that this has on people, and I know that, like, your story is common for a lot of people, is as soon as there's a police officer involved shooting, and then it's this whole, like, investigation kicks in right away. But what is your take on the psychological impact that this does for people after these massive, traumatic, like, highly intense
Well,
circumstances?
the police associations and benevolent associations are starting to really do a good job of what they call uh, post shootings. They realize that an officer's not lying to you when he asks how many times did you shoot, and you say twice, and there's more holes than that in the suspect. That the average officer is there's 97% chance that the officer will not remember a significant incident that happened. That's not the time to ask him. They're starting to give these officers a couple of days. I remember waking up in the night, days and weeks later, thinking, "Man, I should have told that investigator that. I'm just now remembering this." It's a study, and it's been done, and it's pretty common among all first responders in the military. What happened? Well, saw a bad guy, fired rounds. There's more to it than that, and I want to be a part of helping these officers and these first responders, these military guys, pause and give a statement later.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's so important because the place in your brain that you go when these things happen, the primal, stress response place, the lizard brain, as I call it, you're not able to take in all the information. You literally cannot. It's just about safety and survival. And it honestly feels so wrong in a lot of ways to try to get all the answers or to have these people try to recount everything when they're still not even out of that fight or flight response. Like you mentioned, you're in the car and you can't even hear.
Right.
Those kind of things is just I think there's a huge disconnect in understanding. I understand there's the whole other side of it and what the administration has to do, but I'm glad to hear that there's some positive movement towards changing this because it just doesn't make any sense. It really honestly does not.
And something I try to teach, when they take the weapon away from the officer, understand they got to have it. They got to get in possession of the evidence that was caused in the deadly force situation. But I did it. My friends did it later. Everybody does it now. They replace their very own gun in the place of that officer to give that little bit of security and a little bit of support, and everything's going to be all right. Hugs and constant uh, uh, feeling that, or sayings that pumps the officer back into life, that you did what you had to do. Yet did what you have to do.
Yeah, and I think that's such a valuable thing you bring up because we forget about, especially because I come from the fire side. So, like, we're not in that same responsibility or job description, military and police, like you guys were. But to just share a moment of recognition of how that's a big decision for people to make, to literally make the decision to take someone's life or to have to make that call and that decision that doesn't come without a lot of weight to it.
Well, also, including you as a fireman, as well as all first responders and military, my key saying is you will not rise to the occasion, but you will fall to the level of your training. And that's in all, and being prepared and it never happening is okay. But when you're prepared, your brain can process, hey, this is what I'm going to do in this situation. The brain is so intelligent, it can do it in milliseconds. But if you don't train for those scenarios, you don't play those out, you don't check your med kits, you don't check the fire hose, you don't check the dispatcher doesn't check a radio, the ER doc doesn't have his team ready, you'll fall to the level of your training, in 4 seconds.
Mm, mm-hmm. Yeah, complacency or just that's I think they're
I
your biggest threat.
I was very complacent. Had as a canine officer, you got called in crappy situations all the time because it was crappy because they called the dog, and I would get out in those situations with the dog in the car, thinking I got a partner that can, that's got my back, and I got very complacent, and uh, it almost got me.
So speaking of that aspect, do you think that the complacency kind of comes with this certain element of an identity you're holding on to, like this is who you are, this is your job, this is kind of a little bit of the Superman complex, like you can't be
It
hurt
could.
kind of
It
thing?
could. It could be. Hey, I've been a firefighter for 25 years. I've seen it all. Well, no, you ain't.
Yeah, I think it just yeah, you always have to just be prepared. I think being prepared. And I want to talk about what this looked like for you after the fact. So, obviously, highly traumatic event. What did you see in you, your mental health side of it? What was that like for you in the aftermath of all of this?
Well, a friend of mine brought me a gun by the house, so I was able. I wanted my daughter, or stepdaughter at the time, to be here at my house because I knew I was the only one that could really protect her. I wanted my dog back. I wanted my wife back. I wanted to be in the confines of my home. Somebody slept on the couch for 3 nights. A couple guys slept on the or stayed on the porch. Mark unit stayed outside. They gave me a medication to help me sleep the first night, and I rose to a phone call of my wife of 4 months chewing somebody out on the phone, and she slammed the phone down, and I was groggy, and I was like, "What's going on?" And she said, "Look." And the front page of the paper said, "Officer of the Year shoots teen in the back 5 times."
Mm.
For 31 days, I stayed in the press, and they tried to prosecute me because I was a law enforcement officer and the color of my skin.
Would you talk about a psychological trauma in that, right? To be
Right.
in the news and for your family to be
And you're on
exposed like
leave.
that.
You can't go back to the office. You can't work your part-time job for Christmas that you count on every year. Um, your patrol car is no longer in your front yard. uh, your guys are not really communicating with you because they don't really know how this is going to turn out.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so they try to protect themselves, and they're busy investigating, looking after me, but I don't know this. I just know they're not talking to me. And I sat at home for 6 weeks. First grand jury met, and it voted 9-9, 9 to indict, 9 not to indict, even though they saw the video. It went straight down the color of my skin. The second grand jury, they had a construction delay. 6 months later, the grand jury met, and my friends in law enforcement, uh, everybody came to my rescue. They put on a state of the art demonstration of what happened that day. Department of Forensic Science, the Alabama Bureau of Investigations, the county, the city, they all came in and told what really happened on the forensics and what really happened that day. And then they called in the witnesses who all lied and said, I was there for no reason, that I was harassing them, that I had uh, sicked the dog on the suspect, that I had shot him in the back 5 times. And the jury finally goes, that's not what the evidence is showing here. And they chose not to indict me.
Wow. Holy cow. That's a
And,
lot.
I can't return to work immediately.
No.
So there's some time there. New sheriff comes in. He puts me on some desk duty, which almost as bad as sitting home by myself. And it took some time. It took about a year. They took me on a ride along with the chief deputy. 10 minutes into it, we in a vehicle pursuit. Suspect pulls a gun on us. The whole 9 yards, literally 10 minutes. And the sheriff saw my restraint in person. The chief deputy saw my restraint, that I was not what the media had said, Jeffrey Dahmer and a cowboy and all that. And they finally returned me to duty.
Wow. So what I mean, this is so important, I think, for people to hear, and there will be so many people that resonate with this too. Is what were you feeling, or what are you experiencing in your head during the 6 month time period, being isolated, not doing your job, not having any of that, what you used to know? How did that affect your mental health?
Every day, every second, I was thinking there's something else I could have done to prevent this. And it took over 30 years to realize, with the proper counseling and the proper failures that I had, that when I was walking my granddaughter out by the pond, I was like, I did the right thing. Immediately, it was not. I was like, I'm going to have to find another way to make a living. I'm not going to be able to do what I love to do. They're going to take me to trial if they indict me. It could last years. I would have to. I had no money. I was a deputy. I couldn't afford an attorney. But all that worked out. God had a plan, and I'm here today to share with you that I didn't just survive that incident. Now that I won that incident.
Hmm. Packy, what did your journey of healing ended up looking like then? You mentioned going to counseling eventually, but what did that end up looking like for you?
Well, I got asked a couple times to put the training video together, and I did it, but I wouldn't let them release it. So for about 25 years, I didn't talk about it, and I slowly began to drink. I slowly began to view pornography. I slowly had an inappropriate relationship. It happened so slowly, I didn't even remember it happening. And anything to kill that moment, anything to get a night's sleep. I tried Ambient, they put me on. It was crazy what it would do to me. They tried other chemicals and it didn't work. And I received a call from the first deputy or first state trooper that arrived at the scene, Trooper King, and he said, "I want you to tell your story at our graduating class." And I was like, "I got my butt kicked. I'm lucky to not be in jail. I'm lucky to be alive. What could they possibly learn from me?" He caught me 3 times, and I finally put the class together for an hour. And when I left the class, I was like, I've got to change. I have made a mess of my family, my job, my wife, my relationships, and I began the journey of recovering from it all. I got a Christian counselor. I got a wife that stood her ground. Uh, Someone else, my pastor, reads my internet usage now, or then, and still does now. I don't know if he has time for it, but I began to have ways that I couldn't buy alcohol. I went straight to a debit card to email my wife. My oldest daughter had access to all my emails and my text messages, and so it wasn't easy because I'm hard headed. But it took some time, and it didn't happen overnight. But it didn't evolve over. I mean, it didn't evolve overnight. It evolved over some time, so it took some time to finally wake up and say, "I made it."
Mm, wow. I'm really glad that you brought this up around the addiction side, or what these little things that started to creep up, because this starts to happen to all of us, right? That's why I call it sex, drugs, and rock and roll,
That's
whatever
it.
helps mute the some people will say the voices or the memories or the constant record player or flashbacks, all the things, but it's that you feel so disconnected from who you are, and you have so much trouble coming back to a regulated state that you will do anything. You do anything, and you mentioned it started small, and then it started building upon itself in this whole aspect of you don't often notice it until it becomes, usually, honestly, until it wrecks somebody's life. I
That's right.
don't think people really,
No.
um
And I was definitely in the ditch.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely, and especially with, I mean, some of the things that are even celebrated or promoted, things like alcohol, or, it's wild and bizarre how we normalize a lot of these things.
Anything to forget that moment. And but at the end of the day, God's got plans for me, and He's opened some doors. I have a book coming out. I do multiple speaking engagements. My heart, I'm sorry, is men. Men are challenged on a daily basis. They fight all the time, but God built them to fight, and they are warriors. And they need to put some guys around them, and they need to have peace when they get home. And you know, they need to go to the, as the comedian said, to their nothing box from time to time.
Mhm.
And the wife goes, "What are you doing?" "I'm in my nothing box." "Can I go in there?" "No, you cannot go into my nothing box." And I am super grateful. Every day. This morning, I sent my wife a text. I said, "You wouldn't believe how good God has been to us. Even though we get through all that, she gets stage 4 breast cancer, unoperable. And every minute is another day that's not promised. And people ask, 'How you doing?' I say, 'Every day's like Christmas,' because it really is. I'm alive. My wife's still with me. I got 2 daughters and 2 grandkids."
What you're speaking of is so important. I think this element of gratitude, using gratitude to
I
move
do
you
not
through.
deserve to be here,
Mm,
but I am through the grace and
mhm,
mercy.
mhm. So, what do you say to the guy who's listening? Because there are a lot of guys out there that listen to this podcast, and I work with a lot of guys in my practice. So I think you're spot on in your audience for sure. But the guy who thinks he needs to be the strong one, the guy who thinks he needs to keep it all together, the guy who's suffering in silence. What do you say to this guy who's listening to us today?
I got 5 of the toughest guys. They're tough on me, but I surrounded myself with a couple of pastors and a couple of guys. They're all going through the same struggle with marriage and kids and internet usage, and that they're just one drink away from losing everything, but they choose not to because every morning at 6 o'clock, we text each other, and within a second, one or the other can tell what's going on. Are you having a bad day? What's happening? What are you reliving? And I can open to them guys because I trust them.
Yeah, I love that. You trust them, and it sounds like you know they're like your catch safe. They got you. But I'd imagine this had to come with you allowing yourself to be open to that in the first place. That the word that a lot of men don't like is vulnerability, right?
That's
That
right.
being open to it, you have to put yourself there first.
You, as a first responder and the military, every day you shape tomorrow, and tomorrow shapes every week, and that week shapes a day and I call it putting pennies in the jar. I rise early, I put a penny in the jar. I rise early, I do my Bible study, I pray, I draw my gun multiple times. I'm ready. I contact 5 guys that'll get in my business. I'm nice to someone. That jar will move to more jars, to more pennies, because it says in the Bible that the devil's coming. You need to be prepared. And if I put all those pennies and I've ruddered the ship in the right direction, when it happens, I'm ready. I'll know what to do if an inappropriate text comes through, or I'll pass an alcohol store, or, uh, I want to be short with my kids. I've already prepared for that battle, and my brain can process it in millionths of a second because I put it there. But if I choose not to eat right, I choose not to pray, I choose to not draw my gun, I choose not to train, the brain has nothing to pull from, and it's not going to do it.
Yeah, that circles all the way back to what you said at the beginning about you fall back on your highest level of training.
That's right. You will
And
not rise to the occasion, but you will fall to the level of your training.
and I love seeing that in all aspects of your life. So it's not just
That's right.
in your career, but literally in every aspect of your life.
And you, as a first responder and the military, get paid for what you might have to do. You need to be ready to do it. And being ready to do it takes daily adjusting to the rudder of the ship, because you can be off just 1 degree at 100 miles. The ship has a long ways to right itself and get back on destination. So if you steady at it, the little things you do every day start to add up, and your brain can process it when the devil comes, because he's coming. He's like a roaring lion, and you're ready for him. And it's like, whatever. I got this.
Yeah, the confidence. I love that. What about, let's say, let's flip the script a little bit because I'm sure now that you are on your journey with this, you're able to support those other four guys that you talk with. But let's say you're speaking to the person who maybe recognizes that something is off in someone else. They see, behaviors at work start to change, whether maybe they're showing up a little bit late, maybe they're picking up more overtime, maybe they're getting more quiet or more disconnected, or you start hearing things about what's going on at home. Let's say you are that person that's picking up on these signals. What do you encourage that person to do?
The person that's seen the signs and symptoms has got to build a relationship with that person. That person's not going to open up to anybody. He's got to know that what he says or she says is going to stay confidential, but he's also got to be willing to say, it's time for a change. Things are going south. I can tell. Because I know my guys, and it's weird how just a text message now, but I can have "How you doing?" conversation on the phone. I can tell right away because I know that person, but I also did my time to build that trust. If you want a friend, be a friend.
Yes, that whole "you are your brother's keeper." I really latch on it to that way of you have to build the relationship first and you have to have that rapport so that you can have those kind of difficult conversations or you can have that place to talk about things. And it's so important in a world that I think is already pulling us apart from one another,
That's
is
right.
to have that intentional connection and that intentional community with one another just can't be undervalued.
That's right.
Well, give us a few insights into this book of yours that's coming out and where people are going to be able to pick that up, where they can find it, where how we can support you in this big new
Well,
thing that's coming out for you.
I've got a very unusual book, and I've got a team of 5 that I have challenged them to the end. When you read my book, at the end of each book, there's a QR code. Everything I talked about in that previous chapter, there'll be pictures, documents, bios, videos. They'll back that particular chapter and to show you the authenticity of a true crime. You'll be able to find me on my Facebook feeds, all the social media. It'll be on my website. The book is very vulnerable. It takes me, and it's long, but each chapter builds on the next chapter, like putting pennies in the jar. It keeps adding to the next chapter of all the failures, all the mishaps, all the things I did wrong. They all came right at the end, and I didn't just survive. I won. Uh, Very important is you're not always, you always expect the unexpected and never underestimate your opposition. And I say that to every law enforcement first responder that I come to, because if it can happen, it's going to happen at the worst time when you're not prepared. So you need to be the most prepared, even though you're the least prepared. And I really feel that we're not the shepherds and we're not the sheep, but we are the sheepdog. And that sheepdog is there for both the sheep and the shepherd.
That's so well said, and that preparedness of mentally, spiritually, physically, all aspects of preparation. I really like that.
The most important of this that I want you to remember is during the shooting, I saw an image of my child and my wife, and I thought somebody else is going to walk her down the aisle. By the way, I walked her down the aisle.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Packy, thank you so much for your honesty, for your courage, for your willingness to share your story and to talk about this and how it really has led you into this path of healing and this new journey that you're on that will be so incredibly impactful for everybody who listens to your story or picks up your book. Is just incredible. And I know that this conversation is going to hit for a lot of people. I know that it did for me. So thank you for blessing us by being on the show and taking the time. And just want to give you an opportunity if there's anything else that you want to share with our audience today.
We're not promised tomorrow, but let's do it to them before they do it to us. That said it. That was from the NYPD Blues, by the way.
Nice. Well, everybody, thank you for chiming into our conversation today and being a part of this. And thank you to Packy again for coming on our show. Everybody who's listening, you know this drill is go online and make sure you like and subscribe. You're following us because we have a lot of really good stuff coming up, and we really appreciate your love and support. Let's get out there and support Packy and his new book. Pick that up when it comes out. And for those of you listening to me yet again, we will catch you on the flip side and see you for another episode of Sit Around the Fire.